Partnered with my own uncle in the wholesale seafood business. Cleared a net profit of $2.85 million in a year. For the year-end dividend, he just threw me $120,000. The stall is mine. I fronted the capital. You just put in the physical work. $120,000 is plenty for him. I didn't say a word. Took the dividend that wasn't even a fraction of his. Pocketed it and said, "Whatever you say." He thought I was stupid and would keep being his cheap labor forever. Little did he know, I used that money to rent the big place right across from him. As I pulled down the roller shutter, I looked at his face, turning pale instantly. Let's just do our own things from now on. I heard he sat his stall all night that night, and even smashed his calculator. Hi, the year's total is $2.85 million. 365 days a year. We took turns pulling all-nighters watching the seafood pool. Barely ever stopped. Total revenue over $5 million. Net profit was just a few grand shy of $2.9 million. This $2.85 million figure is right. The stall is mine. I fronted the capital. I'm the one who secured the big restaurant connections. You just put in the physical work. Don't look at me like that. Hiring a stock boy out there would cost 10 grand a month tops. And I'd have to cover room, board, and social security. This 120 grand is pure profit for you. It's a lot. I had calculated it countless times. I handled every single restock, loss, and debt collection. Those broken refrigerators cost me over 30 grand just in repairs this year alone. He was right. The stall and capital were his. But how much of that $2.73 million was made by me working my eyes out, risking my life? He never counted that. I said, all right, whatever you say. Don't overthink it. There's a batch of top-tier lobsters arriving on the 1st. The price is good. Get to the docks early. How much did you make with your uncle this year? How was it split? $328 a day. We're uncle and nephew partnering up. Profits split 50-50. If I get a bite, you get a bite. Before the year, he said profits would be split 50-50. After the year, he said, you just put in the work. I stared at that number for a long time. This was what my year of working to death was worth. Didn't he say the stall is his? Then I'll just get one for myself. I called the market's leasing manager. Asked about the 500 square meter premium cold storage across the way. First month's rent plus deposit was only $120,000 at the lowest. I had already fully secured the local retail connections. We could sign a contract in 3 days max. I could open before the new year. That very night, I slammed the money down on the leasing manager's desk. We signed a contract overnight. The moment the cold storage keys were in my hand, I knew my fate would never be in someone else's hands again. 4 a.m. on the first day of the year. The freezing wind at the docks pierced to the bone. I arrived at the boat 2 hours earlier than usual. The moment the captain docked, I went straight up. Old Zhang, I want this entire batch of lobsters. Cash on the spot. Hi. The boat captain froze for a second. Didn't your uncle already call dibs on this? I pulled out a stack of cash. I'm working for myself now. I'll pay 5% more. I'll handle all the inspecting and loading. You won't have to wait a single minute. The boat captain looked at me, stayed silent for a few seconds, and finally nodded. By the time my uncle rushed to the docks, that batch of top-tier lobsters was already fully loaded into my reefer truck. He stood on the empty dock, his face livid. What is the meaning of this? Uncle, didn't you say it yourself? Every man for himself. It's a great start to the new year. I gotta grab some good luck. I shut the truck door, started the engine. My uncle's figure grew smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. I knew the beef between us was permanently sealed. I got the lobsters back and immediately sorted them overnight. This batch was in incredible condition. Every single one was over 1.5 pounds. The claws were full. The antennas were intact. I boxed them up sorted by different sizes. I kept every single one fresh with ice water, ensuring a 0 mortality rate. At 5 a.m., a mass texted the retail buyers in the market. In less than half an hour, over a dozen people gathered at my cold storage door. These were all connections I'd built up over the past year, whose family had troubles that I hadn't helped solve. I remembered all these favors crystal clear. The retailers inspected the goods and eagerly placed their orders. I shipped them out straight at market price. No markups, no ordering. In 2 hours, the entire batch of lobsters was cleared out. Netted 43,000, my first chunk of capital recovered. Hygie Seafood Cold Storage was officially open for business. At 10 a.m., my uncle's phone call came in. I didn't pick up. Soon after, rumors started spreading in the market. Did you hear? I had a falling out with his uncle. Open his own stall. Whoever dares to do business with Ahai can forget about getting goods from me ever again. His uncle put the word out, offending his uncle. How's he going to survive in this market? Starting at noon, retailers started calling in one after another to cancel their orders, sounding very awkward, saying they had family stuff going on and wouldn't be buying stock for a while. I knew what was up and didn't say much. I refunded their deposits in full. At 3 p.m., my uncle brought a few veteran stall bosses from the market and blocked the door of my cold storage. He pointed at my nose and called me an ungrateful bastard, said he brought me out of the countryside, taught me how to do business hand by hand, and I bit the hand that fed me. More and more people gathered around, all watching the drama. I didn't argue with him about the 120 grand. I just calmly asked him what he wanted from me. My uncle choked up and finally dropped a threat. The boat captains in this market and the big clients, no one will dare do business with you. Just wait until you go out of business. He turned and left. Those bosses followed him away. The crowd of onlookers slowly dispersed. Constant whispers drifted over. I stood at the cold storage door, watching their backs, completely unfazed. I had busted my ass in this market for a year. Which boat docked when? Which retailer needed what goods? I knew better than anyone. My uncle thought he had me by the throat, but he didn't know. Real connections are built with genuine effort, not maintained by threats. That night, I hung up my signboard. Hygie Seafood Wholesale. 5 huge characters facing right at my uncle's stall, glaring under the night lights. I also posted a notice at the market entrance. Hiring, stock boy. Monthly salary, 12,000. Room, board, and full insurance included. Do well and get a year-end bonus. The next morning, a young guy named Xiao Lin came to apply. He had just left his hometown for work. With the same hunger in his eyes I had back then. I looked at his hands, covered in calluses. He was a hard worker. I hired him on the spot and told him to start that afternoon. After Xiao Lin left, I stood in the cold storage taking inventory. The refrigerators roared. The temperature on the display stayed steady at -5 degrees. I stared at my uncle's stall across the way. It was brightly lit and bustling with people. Business looked booming, but I knew, without me, those old refrigerators wouldn't last long. During the hottest part of last summer, Unit 3 almost broke down. It was me who took the compressor apart overnight and replaced the parts to save it. My uncle didn't know the first thing about any of that. All he knew was how to count money and schmooze. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. Inside were the numbers of over a dozen boat captains from out-of-town docks. All guys I'd met running goods this past year. My uncle thought cutting off my local supply would kill me. He didn't know the sea was huge, and there was more than one dock. Night fell outside the cold storage. I pulled down the roller shutter and locked it up. Tomorrow at 3 a.m., I was going to drive 200 kilometers to Nangang Dock. There was a boat captain there who promised to save me a fresh batch of coral grouper on the 3rd day of opening. My mom showed up. She stood at the cold storage door holding a thermos. Her hair was a few strands whiter than it was around New Year's. I was taking inventory with Xiao Lin. The moment I saw her, I almost dropped the ledger in my hands. My mom didn't say anything. She just put the thermos on the table. Inside was my favorite pork rib soup. She looked around, looking at this 500 square meter place, looking at the Hygie Seafood sign on the wall. I told Xiao Lin to get back to work and grab a chair for my mom. She sat down and stayed silent for a long time. Finally, she asked me if I had really fallen out with my uncle. I nodded, without explaining. My mom sighed. Your uncle came over yesterday. I treated him well for a whole year. But he's completely ungrateful. He stole my business and intercepted my goods. He's pushing me to a dead end. Your uncle asked me to talk you out of this, to have you transfer the cold storage and go back to working for him. He promised to raise your dividend, to give you 200 grand a year. I listened and didn't respond. I just pulled a file folder from the drawer and handed it to my mom. Inside was my work log for the year. Every purchase invoice, every repair receipt, every call log for debt collection. and to repair logs for those refrigerators. I had highlighted the key points in red pen. Last July, Unit 3's compressor broke. I stayed up for 36 straight hours fixing it. Uncle was playing mahjong in an air-conditioned room. In September, a restaurant owed us 150 grand. I spent half a month chasing it down. Uncle said that was just part of my job. In January, a shipment arrived at 2 a.m. I unloaded 3 tons of seafood all by myself. My back was injured for a month. Uncle only showed up the next day to count the money. My mom flipped through the receipts, her hands shaking. 365 days a year. Uncle and I took turns. But in reality, I did 80% of the work. Total revenue over 5 million. Net profit 2.85 million. Uncle gave me 120,000 and said I just put in some physical labor. My mom's tears fell. She closed the file folder, stood up, and walked away without a word. I knew exactly where she was going. At 4 p.m., arguing could be heard in the market. My mom blocked the door to my uncle's stall, questioning him in front of everyone. Hi, just how much work did he do this year? How did you come up with that 120 grand? My uncle was left speechless. He's ungrateful. The stall is mine. The capital is mine. What right does he have to demand so much? My mom let out a cold laugh. She said, back when you opened this stall, 50 grand of that startup money was a loan from me. Do you still remember that debt? I worked with you for a year, and you didn't even pay him a proper salary. Then just tossed him 120 grand at the end of the year to get rid of him. Does your conscience not bother you? My uncle's face flushed. Red? He tried to argue, but couldn't speak. My mom turned and left. When she passed by my cold storage, she stopped. She looked at me, with no blame in her eyes, only heartache and approval. She said 3 words. Work hard. That night, Shaolin officially started. I taught him how to inspect goods, how to sort them, and how to judge the freshness of seafood. He learned very seriously, taking notes while asking questions. I looked at him and remember myself a year ago. Back then, I was just like this, thinking that as long as I was willing to suffer, my uncle would treat me genuinely. Now I understand. In this world, only having your own stall is truly reliable. At 11 p.m., the lights were still on at my uncle's stall across the way. Through the glass, I saw him sitting there alone, staring blankly at his ledger. The refrigerator next to him was making weird noises. The temperature on the display was jumping around, clearly unstable. I looked away and locked the cold storage door. Got another shipment coming in tomorrow. Can't afford delays. On the 5th day of opening, my supply was cut off. At 4 a.m., I went to the docks to receive goods as usual. Old Zhang's boat had already docked, but he just shook his head when he saw me. Hi. I'm sorry. Your uncle bought out all of today's catch. He paid 20% over market price. I froze for a second, then turned around to find the other boat captains. But after asking around, everyone gave me the same answer. My uncle teamed up with 3 other big stalls in the market and outbid me for the entire local supply, offering 20% above market price. He was trying to star me out. I stood on the empty docks, watching boatloads of seafood get hauled away. The cigarette in my hand burned down to the end. Back at the cold storage, Shaolin was already waiting for me. Seeing me return empty-handed, worry flashed across his face. I didn't say much. I just told him to get some rest and sat alone in the office, flipping through my contacts. The local supply was completely blocked. Then I'll just go out of town. I remembered when I was running goods 2 months ago. I met a boat captain at the new southern dock, surnamed Chun. His batch of goods was struggling to sell at the time. The quality was good, but the size was a bit small. The local wholesalers refused to buy them. I helped him analyze the market and suggested he drop the price and sell to retailers instead. In the end, he cleared his inventory in 3 days. Before I left, Old Chen said hi. If you ever need anything, just ask. I dialed Old Chen's number. It rang for a long time before he picked up. Old Chen sounded sleepy. I got straight to the point. Got any goods lately? I'll take it all cash on the spot. Old Chen was quiet for a few seconds. What do you need all those goods for? I didn't hide it from him. I told him the whole story about my uncle blocking my supply. Old Chen cursed after hearing it. Said that kind of behavior was just too ugly. He told me to wait for his call. After hanging up, the sun was already up. I didn't go back to sleep. Instead, I drove straight to the South Dock. It was a 3-hour drive. I didn't stop once. I arrived at the South Dock at 10 a.m. Old Chin was already waiting for me. A reefer truck was parked next to him, loaded with freshly unloaded seafood. Old Chin took me to inspect the goods. This batch was freshly arrived coral grouper and hairy crabs. The size wasn't top tier, but they were incredibly fresh. The gills were still bright red. The legs were strong. I bought them all on the spot, a 180K bill. Transferred immediately. Old Chun saw the deposit text and patted my shoulder. He said, "Aha, you've got guts. Your uncle is going to crash and burn sooner or later. From now on, you get first pick of my goods at the South Dock." This place was only recently developed. A lot of local wholesalers didn't know about this route yet. The supply here was steady, and prices were 10% lower than up north. Plus, the boat captains were all honest folks. No vese. I chatted with Old Chun for a long time. I felt confident. My uncle thought strangling the local docks would kill me, but he didn't know the sea was huge. There was more than one dock. I drove the fully loaded reefer truck back to the market. Shaolin was already waiting at the cold storage door. Seeing the truck, his eyes lit up. We unloaded the goods overnight, sorted them, and put them on ice. This batch of coral grouper and hairy crabs, though not top tier in looks, won on freshness, and the price was 5% lower than the market. I called up a few old clients. They inspected the goods and ordered on the spot. By 10 p.m. that night, over half of the batch was sold out. Recovered 150 grand in funds. Early the next morning, I drove down to the South Dock again. This time, Old Chin introduced me to 2 other boat captains. They ran deep-sea routes. Their supply was even more stable. I discussed a partnership with them and promised that as long as the goods passed quality checks, I'd pay everything in cash up front, no delays. Hi, you're so young to be striking out on your own. You've got guts. Us seafarers value trust the most. If you can always pay cash on the spot, we'll prioritize supplying you. The 3 boat captains discussed it for a bit and finally agreed to the deal. I shook hands with each of them, and the weight on my mind finally lifted. On the drive back to the city, I got a call from Shaolin. He said, "Boss, your uncle paced around our cold storage door a bunch of times today, watching us unload. He looked incredibly pissed. We also had a few retailers asking around, wondering where we were getting our goods and how our prices were lower than the market." I hung up the phone. Looking at the scenery flying by outside the window, my uncle thought jacking up local prices would force me out. Little did he know, the more he blocked me, the wider my path became. Once the supply from the South Dock stabilized, my costs would be 10% lower than his. The price advantage would show immediately. By then, I wouldn't be the one starved out. With the supply from the South Dock secured, my cold storage business started to take off. For a straight week, I left at 3 a.m. every day for the South Dock to pick up goods. Gotta be back to the market before 10 a.m. This batch is super fresh. The price is a tier lower than local. The retail buyers got a taste of the benefits. Orders kept pouring in. On the 10th day, Old Chin called. Said he had something to discuss with me. I drove over that same afternoon. Old Chin took me to a food stall by the dock. He ordered a few dishes, poured 2 glasses of liquor, and got straight to the point. Hi, I see you're a reliable kid. I want to sign an exclusive supply agreement with you. I put down my chopsticks and looked at him. Over here at the South Dock, there are 5 boats right now. Me, Old Wong, and Old Zhao. We 3 account for half the volume. From what we've seen lately, you always pay cash on the spot. You're professional at inspecting the goods, and you never nitpick. We talked it over. We're willing to give you priority supply, but there's a condition. You got to guarantee you'll take at least 200,000 worth of goods every week, and we'll price it half a notch lower than what we give others. 200K worth of goods for me right now is a lot of pressure, but if I can get the exclusive supply rights, it's like holding the lifeline of the supply. My uncle is jacking up prices and blocking me at the local docks. If I get the lowest price at the South Dock, going back and forth like this, my advantage will show immediately. I shook Old Chen's hand. We signed the agreement on the spot. For a 3-month term, I guarantee 200K in goods a week. They guarantee a stable supply and the best price. After signing the agreement, Old Chun brought up another thing. He said, recently someone used their connections to ask about my supply, offering a very high price, trying to poach this connection. Old Chun said, hi, business is all about trust. You've been good to us. We wouldn't backstab you like that. But you need to be careful too. Your uncle has been running things locally for years. He's got plenty of tricks up his sleeve. I nodded. I knew what to expect. It was already 9 p.m. by the time I got back to the market. Shaolin was still in the cold storage organizing goods. Seeing me come back, he immediately came over to greet me, saying 3 more retail buyers came to order today, and a restaurant owner wants to discuss a long-term partnership. The next morning, I went to that restaurant. The owner's surname is Lee. In his 40s, running 2 chain restaurants in the city. His daily seafood consumption is pretty big. He said he used to always get his goods from my uncle, but recently noticed the dead fish rate getting higher and higher. Complained several times with no improvement. I took him to the cold storage to look at the goods. Bosley inspected the goods very carefully, from the color of the gills to the clarity of the fish eyes. He checked every single detail. Finally, he nodded and said the goods were indeed solid. Asked if I could guarantee a stable supply. I took the South Doc's exclusive supply agreement out to show him. Bosley made the decision on the spot after reading it. From now on, all the seafood from my 2 restaurants goes through you. At least 50K in volume a week. After seeing Bosley off, I stood at the cold storage door and lit a cigarette. At my uncle's stall across the way, he was arguing with someone. Real loud. Through the back glass, you could see a few boxes of dead fish scattered on the floor. A customer was slamming the table. Xiaoling walked over and whispered, "Boss, I hear your uncle's dead fish rate is super high lately. Those refrigerators of his keep breaking down. The temperature fluctuates. A lot of stock got ruined." I didn't say anything, just looked at those refrigerators across the way. I was too familiar with them. The compressor on Unit 3 is aging. You have to check the temperature every 4 hours. The condenser on Unit 2 has a crack. Once the summer load hits, it easily gives out. I had all these quirks figured out, which is why last year, I was able to keep the dead fish rate under 3%. But my uncle doesn't understand any of this. All he knows is crunching numbers and working connections. He has absolutely no idea about the temperaments of these machines. Without me, his stall is like a machine missing a part, running on the surface, but actually starting to fall apart. That night, my cold storage's daily revenue broke 100K for the first time. "Boss, we're definitely going to turn a profit this month." Xiao Ling excitedly showed me the ledger. I looked at the numbers in the ledger, but I felt very calm inside. 100K revenue is nothing to my uncle. At his peak, he could do 300K a day, with a stable supply from the South Dock, and big clients starting to accumulate. The next step is to slowly nibble away at my uncle's market share. At midnight, the lights at the stall across the way were still on. My uncle was sitting there all alone, staring blankly at a pile of dead fish. The refrigerator next to him was making a harsh, screeching noise. The temperature on the display was jumping wildly. I locked up the cold storage. Tomorrow at 3 a.m., there's another batch of king crabs coming into the dock. In the 3rd week after signing the exclusive supply agreement, my cold storage's daily revenue stabilized at over 120K. That afternoon, Old Chin suddenly called, tone serious. Hi. Someone approached him, offering 20% more than me. Wanted to buy out the South Dock supply. The guy is my uncle's closest buddy in the market. My heart sank. I knew my uncle was starting to play for keeps. Hi. That price is definitely tempting. But the guys and I talked it over. Business is about trust. We just signed the agreement 3 weeks ago. We can't just change our minds like that. I'm calling to give you a heads up. Your uncle is going all in this time. Thanks, Old Chun. That night, I drove straight to the South Dock. All 3 boat bosses were there. I treated them to dinner. During the meal, I didn't mention raising the price. We just talked about the hardships of going out to sea. Talked about the market. Old Wong said his son goes to college next year, and he's still a bit short on tuition. I said right then and there, Brother Wong, I'll cover the tuition. Consider it an advance on the goods. We'll deduct it slowly from future deliveries. Old Zhao said his wife was in the hospital and money was tight. I transferred 50K straight to him. Said this money is for emergencies. No rush to pay it back. The boat bosses looked at me. with a new kind of respect in their eyes. Hi, you're a real stand-up guy. No matter how high your uncle bids, we won't budge. Old Chen raised his glass and said, clinking glasses with him put my mind at ease. It was late at night when I got back to the market. I sat in the office running the numbers. The South Dock supply is locked down, but my uncle definitely won't let this go. If he can't poach Boss Chun, he'll definitely strike from another angle. Sure enough, rumors started spreading in the market. Some said my goods were smuggled, without quarantine certificates. Some said my cold storage wasn't up to code and could be shut down at any second. Others said I was related to the boat bosses, and my supply wasn't stable. These rumors were painted so vividly. Pretty soon, customers were calling to ask. I didn't panic. I just took the quarantine certificates from the South Dock, my cold storage business license, and the supply agreements, snapped photos of them all, and sent them to the retail group chat. The rumors collapsed on their own. But my uncle didn't stop. Market management suddenly sent people to inspect my cold storage. They said the local sub-district office reported it, suspecting my refrigeration equipment wasn't up to standard, demanding I shut down for rectification. I was prepared for this. Before the cold storage even opened, all the equipment was set up to the highest standards. Quarantine, fire safety, environmental certificates. I had everything in perfect order. The inspectors dug around for 2 hours but couldn't find a single flaw, and finally left with their tails between their legs. After seeing the inspectors off, Shaolin lowered his voice and said, "It was your uncle who reported us to management." I nodded. I'd anticipated these dirty tricks a long time ago. That afternoon, my cold storage's daily revenue broke $150K, officially surpassing my uncle's stall. The news spread quickly through the market. Everyone was talking about it. This kid has really made it. That evening, a group of creditors gathered at my uncle's stall demanding their money. Lately, to blockade my supply, my uncle had been hoarding goods at high prices at the local docks and teaming up with other stalls to inflate prices. His cash flow was getting really tight. Add to that his dead fish rate staying stubbornly high and losing a ton of customers. His situation was getting tougher and tougher. Shaolin said, "Your uncle's Unit 3 refrigerator broke down again today. An entire box of king crabs died. That's at least an 80K loss." I knew that Unit 3 all too well. Last summer, when it broke down for the first time, I pulled an all-nighter for 36 hours straight to fix it. I knew every single part of it, its every temper. But now it was no longer my responsibility. That night, Bosley called, said a friend of his also wanted to get goods from me. He's the owner of another chain restaurant in the city. At least 70K in volume every week. I promised to pay him a visit the next day. I hung up the phone, stood at the cold storage. By the door, the lights at the stall across the way were still on. Through the glass, I could see my uncle sitting there all alone, with a pile of bills in front of him. His hair seemed to have gotten a bit grayer. His back looked exceptionally frail. I looked away, locked the cold storage door. Tomorrow there's a batch of wild yellow croaker coming in. Customers have already pre-ordered 200K worth. People in the market started gossiping privately, saying my uncle's stall won't hold out much longer. Those old refrigerators of his are constantly breaking down. The dead fish rate has skyrocketed to 15%. A lot of his old customers have started switching over to me. After Shaolin finished organizing the last batch of goods, he excitedly said, boss, our net profit this month could break 500K. I looked at the numbers in the ledger. I felt very calm. 500K is nothing compared to my uncle's peak days. But for me, this is my very own first pot of gold. Late at night, I locked up the cold storage ready to head back to rest. Passing by my uncle's stall, I saw he was still inside bustling about, trying to fix that Unit 3. His movements were very clumsy, obviously clueless about those wires and parts. I stood outside the door and watched for a bit. Ultimately, I turned around and walked away. After my cold storage's daily revenue stabilized at 150K, my uncle started a price war. That morning, word suddenly broke out in the market. All seafood in my uncle's stall had been slashed by 20%. A clearance sale at a loss. A lot of retail buyers heard the news and immediately swarmed his stall. Shaoling ran over and asked, boss, should we lower our prices too? I shook my head. I knew exactly what my uncle was doing. He He wanted to drag me down with a price war, force me to either drop prices and take a loss, or watch helplessly as I lose my customers. But he miscalculated one thing. My costs are a tier lower than his. My supply is more stable than his. More importantly, I don't need to fight him on price. I had Shaolin go buy a batch of insulated coolers and cold chain delivery vans. I was going to upgrade our service, focusing on a high-end route of zero dead fish and on-time delivery. Shaolin didn't quite get it. He said, "Everyone's competing on price right now. Is doing all this really going to help?" I said, "When a price war plays out to the end, it's a battle of who cracks first. Rather than dragging it out with him, better to take a different path." For the next 3 days, I didn't lower prices. Instead, I poured all my energy into service. Before every batch left the warehouse, I personally inspected it, making sure there wasn't a single dead fish. Delivery times were pinpointed down to the half hour. Whenever the customer wanted the goods, that's exactly when I deliver them. At first, some retail buyers really were lured away by my uncle's low prices. But problems soon emerged. My uncle, in order to slash prices, started bringing in cheap stock from small docks. The quality was all over the place. Plus, his refrigerators kept malfunctioning. The dead fish rate stayed stubbornly high. A lot of retail buyers found out, after getting their goods, that although it seemed 20% cheaper on the surface, once they factored in the actual waste, they were losing money instead. Starting on the 5th day, some retail buyers came back to me. They said it doesn't matter if the price is a bit higher. The key is that the quality is stable. I didn't say much, just kept supplying as usual, kept servicing as usual. Bosley called, said his friend had finished his evaluation, and decided to hand all his seafood orders over to me. That was one of the biggest chain restaurants in the city. At least 100K in volume every week. Bosley said, "Hi. My friend checked out your uncle's place before too, but his goods are inconsistent. Too many dead fish, even though your prices are a bit higher. Zero dead fish and on-time delivery. That's what really matters to a restaurant." I met up with Bosley's friend, signed a cooperation agreement right on the spot. Starting next week, the 100K weekly orders would all go through my cold storage. After signing the agreement, I got back to the market around dusk. There were several boxes of returned goods piled up outside my uncle's stall. A few retail buyers were arguing with him. My uncle's face was flushed bright red. His voice was totally hoarse. Shaolin said, "Your uncle's had a crazy amount of returns these past 2 days. I heard he's paid out over 100 grand just in compensation alone." I stood at the cold storage door watching the situation. Across the way, my uncle's price war hadn't even lasted 10 days, and it was already starting to crash. His cash flow was tight to begin with. Now selling at a loss, plus paying for returns. He just couldn't hold on at all. What's more fatal is, those cheap goods he brought in to cut prices completely smashed his own reputation. Many old customers lost trust in him and started switching over to my side. By evening, my cold storage's daily revenue topped 200K. Xiaoling excitedly showed me the ledger, saying, "Boss, our net profit this month could break 800K. I looked at the numbers in the ledger. I felt very calm inside. A price war is never about who slashes prices harder. It's about who can hold out until the end. My uncle thought he could drag me down with low prices. Little did he know, the real moat is quality and service. Late at night, the lights at the stall opposite were still on. My uncle sat there all by himself. Piled in front of him was a huge stack of bills and return receipts. His phone kept ringing nonstop. Must be creditors hounding him for cash. I locked the door to the cold storage, getting ready to head back and rest. Tomorrow, there's a batch of Australian lobsters coming in. That's the first order for Boss Lee's friend's restaurant. Can't afford any mistakes. Reaching the market entrance, I glanced back over my shoulder. My uncle's stall looked incredibly bleak in the night. That signboard that had hung there for over a decade was swaying in the wind, making a creaking noise. People in the market were already gossiping privately, saying my uncle really played himself this time. The price war didn't bring a high down. Instead, it dragged him into the mud. Others said at this rate, my uncle's stall won't survive a month. I didn't join in their gossip. I just quietly minded my own business. Early the next morning, that batch of Australian lobsters arrived right on time. I personally inspected goods, processed and prepped them, kept the whole one-stop service totally flawless. Pleasure doing business. After Boss Lee's friend received the goods, he immediately added another 50K to his order on the spot. He had already lost this price war. 3 days after the price war ended, Boss Zhang of Jinding Grand Hotel was hosting his son's wedding banquet. Ordered seafood for 300 tables. A huge event went down in the market. The biggest buyer in the city, Boss Zhang of Jinding Grand Hotel, was hosting his son's wedding banquet. Ordered seafood for 300 tables. A massive amount of goods. Whoever could land this deal could basically establish a rock-solid foothold in the market. Boss Zhang has run his restaurant for 20 years. It's always been the top choice for high-end banquets. All these years, his seafood has come from my uncle. The two of them are super tight. The banquet was set for Saturday. They started prepping the goods 3 days in advance. For this deal, my uncle dumped almost all his capital into it, scrambling for stock from every dock, hoping to use this opportunity to bounce back. On Friday afternoon, word suddenly broke out in the market. Something went wrong at Jinding Grand Hotel. Shaolin ran over and said, "That batch of seafood your uncle supplied had major issues. Half the king crabs were dead. The Australian lobsters weren't fresh either." Boss Zhang threw an absolute fit at the restaurant, demanded your uncle restock immediately, or else he'd cancel their partnership altogether. I stood at the cold storage entrance and saw from afar that my uncle's stall was a total mess. He was on the phone, frantically trying to find stock, but it was already Friday evening. The wedding banquet starts tomorrow at noon. There wasn't nearly enough time to ship stock in from out of town. And as for local stock, he'd already pissed everyone off with his high price hoarding earlier. Now nobody was willing to sell to him. At 6 p.m., Boss Zhang showed up at the market in person. He's in his 50s, usually very easygoing, but this time he was pale with anger. He stood at the entrance to my uncle's stall, shouting loudly, "We've worked together for so many years. I've always trusted you. But what kind of crap did you give me this time? A 300-table wedding banquet. How am I supposed to explain this?" My uncle was sweating profusely, apologizing nonstop, saying he'd definitely find a way to restock. Boss Zhang said, "If you can't come up with acceptable stock by 10 p.m. tonight, then we're done doing business." Just as Boss Zhang turned to leave, he happened to see me standing across the way at the cold storage door. He paused for a second, walked over and asked if I was a high. I nodded. Boss Zhang asked straight up, "Do you stock right now?" "I need 50 king crabs, 80 pounds of Australian lobsters, 100 pounds of coral groupers. All gotta be alive. Top quality. Can you deliver them to the restaurant before 10 p.m. tonight?" I quickly ran the numbers in my head. The current stock in the cold storage wasn't enough. But over at the South Pier, Old Chen just got a batch of goods in today. I know the quality very well. Moving goods from the South Pier to the city, and then delivering them to Jinding Hotel. Time is really tight, but it's not impossible. I said I can do it, but I have to inspect the goods first, to make sure the quality is fine. Boss Zhang looked at me, stayed silent for a few seconds, and finally nodded. He said, "This is my son's wedding banquet. There can't be any mistakes." I immediately called Old Chen, told him to save the batch that arrived today for me. Then I grabbed Shaoling and drove the cold chain truck straight to the South Pier. By the time we reached the South Pier, it was already 7:30 p.m. The goods had been prepared early in the morning. I checked them one by one, making sure every single one was alive and kicking. After inspecting, we loaded the truck right away and headed back. We got back to the market at 9 p.m. Xiaolin and I worked through the night to sort them. We didn't dare to be careless with a single detail. At 9:40, we loaded the goods and headed straight to Jinding Hotel. We arrived at the hotel at exactly 9:55. Boss Zhang was already waiting in the kitchen. He inspected the goods himself. The lobsters and crabs were all fresh and alive. The shrimp were strong. The Australian lobsters had their antennae intact and were full of energy. The leopard coral groupers had bright red gills and clear eyes. After Boss Zhang finished inspecting, a smile finally appeared on his face. He patted my shoulder and said, "Ah, hi. This batch is perfect. You really saved me in a pinch." I said it was what I ought to do. Boss Zhang looked at me and said, "Young man, You did me a huge favor this time. Later on, I want to talk to you about long-term cooperation. I nodded. By the time I got back to the market, it was 11 p.m. The lights of my uncle's stall across the way were still on. Through the glass, I could see him sitting there alone, with that batch of dead king crabs and lobsters in front of him. His phone was lying on the table, the screen dark. Boss Zhang probably wasn't answering his calls anymore. Xiaoling said, "Boss, your uncle is completely done for this time. Jinding Hotel is the biggest client in the city. Losing this client, he basically has no chance of making a comeback." I didn't say anything. I just locked up the cold storage. I still have to go help at the hotel tomorrow to make sure the wedding banquet goes smoothly. On Saturday, the day of the wedding banquet, I rushed to Jinding Hotel early in the morning. The kitchen was a flurry of activity. I personally kept an eye on the preparation of every seafood dish. The king crabs were steamed to perfection. The Australian lobster sashimi was incredibly fresh. The steamed leopard coral grouper was tender and juicy. Boss Zhang was in the banquet hall greeting guests, occasionally looking back at the kitchen. He had a smile on his face the whole time. At 12 p.m. noon, the wedding banquet officially began. The guests at all 300 tables couldn't stop praising the seafood dishes. A few bosses asked Boss Zhang right then and there, "Where did you get this batch of goods?" Boss Zhang smiled and said, "It was supplied by a young man in the market. The quality is absolutely top-notch." By 3 p.m., Boss Zhang called me into his office. He had a waiter bring in some tea. He sat down and lit a cigarette. Boss Zhang said he saw things clearly after this wedding banquet. Hi, thanks to you this time, or else I would have completely lost face. We cooperated for so many years. It was really good in the beginning, but it's been getting worse these past 2 years. The dead fish rate is high, and his attitude is arrogant. When problems arise, he never admits fault and only makes excuses. Boss Zhang said, "Hi, I've made up my mind. From now on, all the hotel's seafood goes through you. I have 2 restaurants here. Can you guarantee a supply of at least 200,000 a week?" I said I can guarantee it. The supply from the South Pier is stable, and the quality is guaranteed. Plus, I have professional cold chain delivery. 0 dead fish delivered on time. You can rest assured, Boss Zhang. Boss Zhang listened and nodded in satisfaction. He said to come to the hotel next Monday to sign a formal cooperation agreement to take effect starting next month. Securing this deal meant my cold storage's daily cash flow could stabilize at over 300,000, completely surpassing my uncle's peak levels. I drove back to the market. On the way, I got several calls from the bosses who attended the wedding banquet, asking if I could supply them. I jotted down their contact info one by one and made appointments to visit them. Word in the market now was that, after securing the Jinding Hotel order, I was about to take off. At 8 p.m., I stood at the door of my cold storage, looking at the lights still on at my uncle's stall across the way. But it was completely empty inside. Only my uncle was sitting there. He had a pile of bills in front of him, constantly punching numbers on a calculator in his hand. Xiaoling came over and lowered her voice, saying, "Boss, I heard your uncle went to Boss Zhang today to beg for mercy. But Boss Zhang didn't even let him in the door. Some people also said, your uncle got completely stuck with all the goods for this wedding banquet. He lost at least 300,000. I didn't say anything. I just lit a cigarette. My uncle was really done for this time. Losing his biggest client, Jinding Hotel, his capital chain had completely snapped. Combined with the losses from the previous price war and the interest on those loan shark debts, he couldn't hold on anymore. People in the market started gossiping privately, saying my uncle's stall wouldn't survive this month. Some also said his old refrigeration units were completely scrapped and couldn't even be fixed. The next day, I went to visit those bosses I met at the wedding banquet. They were famous restaurant owners in the city and had very high standards for seafood. I took them to the cold storage to look at the goods and detailed the supply sources from the South Pier and our delivery services. The bosses were all very satisfied and signed letters of intent right on the spot, including the Jinding Hotel order. I now had 5 major restaurants for long-term cooperation, totaling over 400,000 a week. Xiaolin said excitedly, "Boss, we've really made it this time." Looking at the contracts in my hand, I felt very calm. from 120,000 to now, in less than 2 months. Not only had I gained a firm foothold, but I also secured the highest quality client resources in the market. That afternoon, I took a trip to the South Pier to discuss expanding the supply volume with Old Chun and the others. Old Chun said it was no problem. They still had 2 ships they could deploy to ensure a stable supply. It was already dusk by the time I got back to the market. I saw that at the entrance to my uncle's stall, another group of creditors had gathered. They were very loud, demanding he pay them back. My uncle stood there, his hair all messy, his face pale. He looked like he had aged 10 years. Xiaolin said, "Boss, I heard your uncle went to the bank for a loan today, but he got rejected. The money he owes now adds up to over $1 million. He simply can't pay it back." I didn't say anything and just went back to the cold storage to continue working. We have another batch of goods coming in tomorrow. We can't afford any delays. After securing the Jinding Hotel order, my cold storage's daily cash flow stabilized at over 300,000. But I knew relying solely on a few big restaurants wasn't enough. The individual vendors in the market were the true foundation. Only by integrating them could I truly control this market. That afternoon, I got about a dozen or so vendors I was on good terms with and called them into the cold storage. These were the people I had been dealing with over the past half year. For some, I had helped advance funds. For others, I had helped solve supply issues. I poured them some tea and got straight to the point about my idea. I said, the market competition is fierce right now. It's hard for individual vendors to survive fighting alone. I want to form a joint sales alliance centered around my cold storage. We'll unify our supply, unify our pricing, and unify our delivery. We'll band together for mutual support and share the profits. A few vendors looked at each other. Someone asked how it would work exactly. I said, it's very simple. First, all supplies will go through me. I guarantee the best quality and prices. Second, delivery will be unified. We'll use my cold chain trucks to reduce losses. Profits will be split proportionally. I take 30%, and you take 70%. A vendor named Wang said, "Ahai, your idea isn't bad, but why should we partner with you? What if you use your supply advantage to squeeze us?" I said, "Brother Wang, we've been working together for a long time now. You should know what kind of person I am. Besides, if I wanted to squeeze you, I could do it right now. I'm setting up this alliance so we can all make money, not so I can eat all the profits myself." Another vendor said, "Ahai, what about your uncle? Even though he's doing poorly now, he's still been in the market for over 10 years. His connections are still there. If we partner with you, will he retaliate?" I said, "He can't even protect himself right now. He doesn't have the energy to care about you. Doing business relies on capability, not connections." A few vendors discussed it for a bit, and finally they all nodded. That night, I signed alliance agreements with 13 vendors. They said, "Ahai, you're a real stand-up guy. We trust you." Starting next week, all their supplies would go through me, and their deliveries would exclusively use my cold chain trucks. I promised to guarantee stable supply, the best prices, and zero dead fish. Xiaoling said excitedly, "Boss, now we've truly integrated the market." Once this joint sales alliance was up and running, I controlled the vast majority of supplies and sales channels in the market. My uncle's market share would be further squeezed. His situation would become even tougher. The alliance officially began operating. I brought in huge batches of goods from the South Pier and distributed them uniformly to alliance members. The delivery trucks arrived right on schedule. Every batch had zero dead fish. Once the vendors got their goods, they all gave a thumbs up and said banding together makes business better and better. Word quickly spread around the market that Ahai formed a joint sales alliance, and over a dozen vendors had joined. Everyone was banding together, and business was booming. When my uncle heard the news, his face looked even worse. His market share had already been squeezed by me down to almost nothing. Now that I had also integrated the vendors, he completely lost his competitiveness. Xiaolin said, "Boss, your uncle went looking for a few vendors again today. Wanted to pull them back, but nobody paid him any attention. Someone even told him to his face, 'Working with Ahai now, the supply is stable and the prices are fair. Why should we go back to you?' I didn't say anything and just kept busy with my own work. That afternoon, I got a call from Old Chun. He said 2 new ships had arrived at the South Pier, making the supply even more plentiful. He asked if I could increase my supply volume further. We have too many goods over here. We need a stable sales channel. I said no problem. Now with the Joint Sales Alliance, my sales channels are completely open. I can digest as many goods as you have. After hanging up, I stood at the cold storage entrance and looked across at my uncle's stall. He was arguing with a creditor. They were very loud. The creditor pointed a finger at his nose and cursed, saying if you borrow money, you have to pay it back. Don't make excuses. My uncle's face was beet red, constantly explaining, asking for a few more days, and promising he'd figure out a way to pay it back. But the creditor wouldn't listen at all, outright threatening that if he didn't pay up this week, he'd go to court and sue him. Xiaoling came over, lowered her voice, and said, "Boss, I heard the money your uncle owes right now already exceeds 1.5 million. Even if he mortgages that stall, it won't be enough to pay off his debts. He's truly reached a dead end now." I stood at the door to the cold storage, looking at the entire market brightly lit and full of people coming and going. It was a scene of bustling activity. But my uncle's stall across the way looked exceptionally desolate. Xiaolin said, "Boss, the whole market is saying now that you're the real boss of this market. Your uncle's era has passed." I didn't say a word. I just locked the cold storage door. Another batch of king crabs is coming in tomorrow. Alliance members have already pre-ordered 500,000 worth. This market was already mine. The Joint Sales Alliance had been running for 2 weeks, and everything was going very smoothly. My cold storage's daily cash flow stabilized at over 400,000. My market share had already reached 60%. That afternoon, I was in the cold storage, doing inventory when Old Chun suddenly called. His tone was urgent. He said the weather station had issued a typhoon warning. A super typhoon was making landfall in 3 days. All ships had to return to port to shelter from the wind. This meant for at least a week, there would be no fresh seafood supplied to the market. My heart tightened. I immediately asked Old Chun if they could still ship goods right now. Old Chun said today was the last day. Starting tomorrow, all ships had to be back in port. "Do you want them?" "I want them all. I'll be right there." I hung up the phone and immediately called for Xiaolin, driving the cold chain truck straight to the South Pier. With the market out of stock during the typhoon, seafood prices were definitely going to skyrocket. If I could stockpile enough goods in advance, not only could I guarantee supply for the Alliance members, I could also stabilize the market. They were probably already clearing out their stock at the pier by now. It was dusk by the time we reached the South Pier. Old Chun and his crew were urgently unloading. Once the goods were inspected on the pier, I transferred the money on the spot. Old Chun said, "Ahai. This typhoon is coming in fierce. You need to be prepared. I reckon we'll be grounded for at least a week. The market will definitely run out of stock." I nodded. I know what I'm doing. Driving the goods back to the market overnight, it was already 11 p.m. Xiaolin and I started sorting, packing, and putting them into cold storage. I made a point to check the cold storage's backup power to ensure we wouldn't lose power during the typhoon. Early the next morning, news of the typhoon started spreading in the market. Xiaoming said, "Boss, everyone in the market is scrambling for goods right now. Prices have already gone up 30%. I said, "No rush. We secure the supply for Alliance members first. We'll see about the surplus goods later." I gathered the Alliance members for a meeting. The typhoon is coming, and the market will be out of stock for at least a week. I've stockpiled goods in advance on my end, so I can guarantee everyone's supply won't be affected. Prices won't go up. Ahai, you really do have foresight. Otherwise, we'd all have to suspend business this time. Yeah, right now, you can't buy goods anywhere in the market. You're the only one who has them. After the meeting ended, other stall bosses in the market started coming to me, wanted to buy goods at high prices. I rejected all of them, saying the goods had to be prioritized for Alliance members. In the afternoon, I heard some news. My uncle was also stockpiling. "Boss, your uncle took out a loan shark loan and bought a huge batch of goods at high prices from several small piers. I hear he wants to make a killing during the typhoon to stage a comeback." My heart sank. My uncle had hit a total dead end now. This time was a desperate, all-or-nothing gamble. But his old refrigeration units simply couldn't handle that massive volume of goods. If anything went wrong, the losses would be absolutely disastrous. That evening, I purposely went to check out my uncle's stall. He was directing workers to move goods into the cold storage. A rare smile appeared on his face. His refrigeration units were all cranked to the max, emitting a harsh, roaring sound. I stood across the way, looking at those old machines, with a bad premonition in my heart. Boss, the goods your uncle stockpiled this time total at least 500,000. Can those broken-down machines of his hold up? I shook my head. That night, I double-checked all the equipment in my cold storage again. The refrigeration units were running normally, and the temperature was stable at -5 degrees. The backup power was tested and ready to activate at any time. I also prepared a few small generators, just in case. At 12 o'clock midnight, I stood at the cold storage door, looking at the sky. Dark clouds were starting to gather, and the wind was getting stronger. The weather station's forecast said the typhoon would make landfall in the early hours of the day after tomorrow, with winds reaching force 14. The lights were still on at my uncle's stall across the way. Through the glass, I could see him sitting there alone, facing all those goods, with a look of eager anticipation on his face. He thought this typhoon was his chance to turn things around, not realizing this could be the final straw that crushes him. The next day, the typhoon drew closer. The sky was gloomy, and the wind had already reached force 8. Many stalls in the market started closing early to prepare for the typhoon. I had Xiaolin check all the equipment once more to ensure nothing would go wrong. The alliance members were also fully prepared, waiting to resume business after the typhoon passed. At 4 p.m., I received a call from Old Chen. Hi. The typhoon is even stronger than expected. You guys over there need to be really careful. All our ships over here have already returned to port and been secured, and the pier has been cleared out too. Don't worry. After hanging up, I stood at the cold storage entrance, looking at the darkening sky. The wind was howling stronger. Over at my uncle's stall, he was still busy working, but I noticed that his number 3 refrigeration unit's display screen was starting to flicker, and the temperature reading was unstable. My heart skipped a beat. I was way too familiar with that machine. This is a sign it's going to break down. The typhoon made landfall. Wind and rain instantly swept across the city. Billboards on the street were blown sideways. Trees snapped in half. The market was pitch black. Only a few stalls had emergency lights blinking. Xiaolin and I stayed in the cold storage, keeping a close eye on the equipment. The chillers were running normally. The temperature was stable. The backup power was ready to go. At 4 a.m., the market suddenly lost power. I immediately started the backup generator. The lights in the cold storage came back on. The chillers kept running. I breathed a sigh of relief. This is the benefit of preparing ahead. Xiaolin leaned against the window, looking out. Suddenly he said, "Boss, it looks like something's wrong at your uncle's place." He walked over, looked through the rain at my uncle's stall opposite us. It was pitch black. The chillers had all stopped working. He was running around inside with a flashlight, clearly looking for a backup power source. But he hadn't prepared one at all. Xiaolin said, "Boss, if his power stays out, all those goods are going to be ruined." I didn't say anything, just kept staring at my own equipment. The typhoon lasted for a full 6 hours. The wind and rain gradually died down. The sky started to turn pale. I walked out of the cold storage. The market was a total mess, full of blown debris and standing water everywhere. Across the way, my uncle's stall doors were wide open. "Boss, your uncle's place is totally done for. 6 hours without power. The chillers all quit. 500,000 in goods, all dead. King crabs, Australian lobsters, leopard coral groupers, all turned into a pile of rotten meat." Uncle was sitting there, his eyes vacant. He looked like his soul had been sucked dry. He saw me. A trace of complex emotion flashed in his eyes. But in the end, he didn't say anything. He just lowered his head. I turned and walked away. I didn't look at him again. Back in the cold storage, I started taking inventory. 0 loss during the typhoon. All the seafood was alive. I immediately notified the alliance members. The typhoon has passed. We have plenty of stock. We can supply as normal. At 10 a.m., the market started to reopen, but most stalls suffered heavy losses due to the blackout. They had absolutely no stock to sell. In the entire market, only my cold storage was still running normally. Soon, Hygie Seafood was the only place in the market with stock. Buyers from major restaurants started calling one after another, asking if I could supply them. I said yes, but the price goes by the current market rate. Alliance members get priority, and the price stays the same. Other customers pay the market price. That day, my cold storage was packed to the brim. Restaurant owners, retail buyers, even bosses from other stalls came to me for goods. I supplied them in order, making sure every customer got their goods, but absolutely no hoarding. Boss, today's revenue has already broken 1 million. I didn't say anything. This wasn't the outcome I wanted, but this is how the market works. The prepared survive. The unprepared get eliminated. At 3 p.m., several creditors showed up at my uncle's stall. Oldly, how are you going to pay back the money you owe us? How much are these rotten goods worth? Give me a little more time. I'll definitely find a way to pay you back. If you don't pay up in 3 days, we're taking you to court and sealing your stall. Uncle looked totally drained of energy, leaning against the wall, unable to say a single word. Boss, your uncle's 500K in goods are a total loss this time. He still owes over 1 million in debt. He can't possibly recover. I stood at the door of my cold storage, watching the situation across the way. I felt absolutely nothing. That night, the typhoon completely passed. The sky cleared up. I stood at the market entrance, looking at the starry sky. This typhoon completely changed the market landscape. The lights were still on at my uncle's stall opposite us. He was sitting there alone, staring motionless at that pile of rotten seafood. Those chillers were completely ruined. The screens were all blacked out. They couldn't be fixed anymore. I heard Old Lee is completely screwed this time. Before the typhoon, he bet everything on borrowing loan sharks to hoard goods. And it all went down the drain overnight. Now, not only can he not recover, he's also drowning in even more debt. The next day, Old Chin called and said the typhoon had passed. The boats are starting to head out to sea again. We'll have new shipments in port in 3 days. How much do you need? Prepare double the previous amount. The market's out of stock right now, and demand is huge. A lot of stalls are cleaning up their losses. Some have even just closed down. But my cold storage business is better than ever. That afternoon, I was in the cold storage checking the new arrivals. Boss, your uncle's at the door saying he wants to see you. I looked up. Through the glass, I saw my uncle standing outside. His hair was a mess. He had stubble all over. He looked incredibly haggard. Uncle saw me, and it took him forever to squeeze out one word, a hi. I lit a cigarette and didn't say anything, waiting for him to speak. Uncle was silent for a long time, just begging you for one thing. Can you lend me some money? My whole batch of goods got ruined the night of the typhoon. Now, my creditors are coming to my door every day, saying they'll take me to court. I'm at a total dead end. Can you please, for the sake of us being family, help your uncle out? Uncle, how much do you owe? Including interest, 1.6 million. 1.6 million is no small amount. Hi. Uncle knows I did you wrong before. That 120K thing, I was confused. Your business is so big now. 1.6 million is nothing to you. You lend it to me, and I'll definitely pay you back later. Uncle, how are you going to pay me back? I still have that stall. Even though it's not worth much now, the location is still there. When I bounce back, I'll pay you back with interest. Uncle, do you really think you can bounce back? Uncle choked on my words. His face turned bright red. I continued. Before the typhoon, the weather station issued a warning. Everyone knew to prepare a backup power supply. You didn't. You bet it all borrowing loan sharks to hoard goods. This was your own choice. Now that things went wrong, you come to me for a loan. Based on what? Hi. We're family. Uncle, back when you were paying out dividends, you didn't treat me like family. I worked my ass off for you 365 days a year. You gave me 120K and said I just did manual labor. Now that you're in trouble, suddenly you remember we're family. Uncle, I can help you, but I'm not lending you money. Hi, just tell me. As long as you can help me get through this, I'll agree to any condition. Transfer your stall to me. I'll pay 1.6 million. I'll help you pay off all your debts. That stall is just an empty shell now. The chillers are all busted. The customers are all gone too. Even if he doesn't transfer it to me, the creditors will still get the court to seize it. Rather than having it seized, you might as well sell it to me. At least you can clear your debts and avoid jail. Hi, that stall is my life's work. Life's work doesn't pay the bills. You only have two choices now. Either transfer the stall to me, clear your debts, and start over, or wait for your creditors to take you to court. Your stall gets seized, and you go to jail. Hi, can you add a little more money? 1.6 million is the market price. With your stall in its current state, being worth this much is already pretty good. Uncle was silent for a long time. Finally, he lowered his head and said, I'll think about it. I said, Uncle, the creditors gave you a 3-day deadline. Today is already day 2. You don't have much time to think. Uncle didn't say anything else, turned around and left. His back was hunched over. He looked like he'd aged 10 years all at once. That night, I got news. The creditors went to my uncle's stall again. They just started hauling stuff out of the stall. If you don't pay up by tomorrow, we're going to court. Uncle stood at the door of his stall, watching those people take his things away. He couldn't say a single word. The next morning, Uncle came back. This time he held a document in his hand. It was the property deed for the stall. He stood in front of me, silent for a long time. Finally, he handed me the document and said, hi. I agree. I took the document, glanced at it, and said, then we'll go to the notary this afternoon to do the paperwork. Uncle nodded, turned to leave. When he got to the door, he suddenly stopped. He looked back at me and said, hi. You won. I didn't say anything. Just watched him leave. I finished the paperwork that afternoon. Immediately started renovations. Knocked out the wall between the new and old stalls. Expanded the cold storage. I stood at the cold storage door, looking at the stall across the way that would soon be mine. The sign that had hung there for over a decade was still there, but it would soon be replaced by Hygie Seafood. The day after signing the transfer agreement, I began remodeling the stall. I hired a professional renovation crew, knocked through the old stall and my cold storage, tore down the partition wall in the middle. The whole space instantly doubled in size. I ordered 6 brand new imported chillers, equipped with the most advanced temperature control system and backup power. The cold chain delivery fleet also increased to 5 trucks. Now we could serve more customers at the same time. During the renovation, gossip in the market was nonstop. This kid, Ahai, is ruthless. He didn't even spare his own uncle. If his uncle had treated him better back then, he wouldn't be in this situation today. I ignored all the chatter and just focused on the renovation progress. A week later, the new stall was finished. A massive 1,000 square meter space. 6 brand new chillers lined up neatly. The delivery trucks were parked outside. The Hygie wholesale seafood sign looked especially striking in the sun. On opening day, I didn't hold any ceremony. Just notified the alliance members and a few big clients. But word still got out. Almost everyone in the market came over to watch the spectacle. Boshong brought a few restaurant owners over to congratulate me. He looked at the scale, gave a thumbs up, and said, hi. It's only been a few months, and you've managed to consolidate the market like this. Impressive, brother. Hi, ha. They said that working with me, they've made more in 2 months than they did all last year. I said, let's all work hard together, and things will be even better. On opening day, our monthly revenue broke 1.5 million. Orders were lined up from morning till night. The 5 delivery trucks were constantly going back and forth. All the customers got their goods on time. Xiaolan excitedly showed me the ledger. Said, boss, at this rate, our net profit this month could break 3 million. I nodded. 3 million. That was my uncle's net profit for all of last year. Now we can do in 1 month. Towards evening, I stood at the stall door, looking at the whole market. Where my uncle's stall used to be, it was now all mine. That night, I gathered the alliance members and a few core employees together for a meeting. I said, starting next month, I take 20%. You guys take 80%. Boss, how can we do that? You're providing the supply and delivery and taking the risk. 20% is too little. Brother Wong, I've got scale now. With this volume, 20% is plenty. You guys need to earn more, So you're motivated to keep working with me. Working with you. It's totally worth it. After the meeting, I stood at the stall door. The market was brightly lit, a scene of bustling activity. Boss, your uncle came to the market today. He stood at the entrance for a long time, looking at our new stall, looking from one end to the other and back again. Just stood there perfectly still. Finally, he left without saying a word. Uncle used that 1.6 million to pay off all his debts. But the foundation he'd built over 10 years in this market was completely gone. Late that night, I locked up the stall, ready to head back to rest. Passing the market entrance, I saw a familiar figure standing there. It was my uncle standing at the market entrance, staring at that Hygie wholesale seafood sign. His eyes looked conflicted. I walked over and stood beside him, silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "Hi, do a good job." After that, he turned around and left. I stood at the market entrance, watching his back disappear into the night. His back was hunched over. He walked very slowly. He no longer had the swagger of the stall boss he once was. From 120K to now, in less than 3 months' time, I pulled off a complete comeback. The biggest stall in the market, the most stable supply, the best customers were all in my hands. This market is mine now. From the end of this year, from breaking off with 120K at the start of the year, to controlling the whole market now. It feels like a lifetime ago. That afternoon, I gathered all the employees and alliance members and set up a dozen tables in the new stall. Xiaolin, Old Chun, Old Wang, Old Zhao, and the 13 retail buyers. Everyone who fought alongside me was there. I stood up, raised my glass, and said, "This past year, thanks to everyone for your support. Today is our year-end bonus day." I keep my word. Xiaolin was the first to get his bonus. I handed him a red envelope. Inside was 200,000. His starting salary was 12,000 a month. I promised him if he worked hard, this 200K year-end bonus would be exactly what he deserved. The 13 retail buyers also got their cut. Xiaolin and the retail buyers were too excited to speak. "You guys stick with me, and I won't do you wrong. Keep up the good work next year, and things will be even better, Brother Hai." I won't say another word. It's all in the drink. "Brother Hai, boss." "Ahai, ahai. You're a stand-up guy, kid. We weren't wrong about you. Ahai's loyal. Working with him was the right call. Uncle Chun, without you guys, there wouldn't be any goods for Hygie this year. You gave me the best of the best. I know that for a fact. Come on, let's toast Brother Hai. If it weren't for him, we'd still be slaving away for someone else, making that dead-end monthly salary. We all built this together. It wasn't just my doing. The banquet broke up. It was already late at night. I stood at the stall door. Xiaolin walked over, holding a ledger to show me. Said, "Since opening, total revenue is 23 million. I took the ledger, flipped through the numbers on it. Net profit is 8.5 million. Last year, I worked an entire year with my uncle. Total revenue was just over 5 million. Ended up with exactly 120K at the end. This year, on my own for less than 3 months. Net profit is 3 times last year's. I've learned a lot this past year. The rules only give you real leverage when you hold them in your own hands. Back then, my uncle said the stall was his. The capital was his. The connections were his. So he called the shots. Now the stall is mine. The supply is mine. The customers are mine. I call the shots. But I won't be like my uncle. He wanted the whole pie to himself, squeezed me dry, and ended up totally alienated. What I'm going to do is make sure everyone working with me makes money. That's the only way to go far." Xiaolin told me. Uncle's working at a small restaurant now, working in the kitchen. Uncle went from a stall boss to a wage earner. That kind of fall isn't something normal people can handle. But it was his own choice. How he treated me back then is exactly how he ended up now. At midnight, I locked the stall door. The New Year's bell was about to ring. People in the market started setting off firecrackers. I stood under the Hygie wholesale seafood sign, looking at this 1,000 square meter stall, looking at those 6 brand new chillers, looking at the 5 cold chain delivery trucks parked outside. From 120K to 8.5 million, from an exploited worker to the biggest supplier in the market. It took me less than 3 months. This year, I learned the most important thing: rules. Only when you hold them in your own hands do you have real leverage. Xiaolin walked over and said, "Boss, Happy New Year! Happy New Year! Fireworks started blooming in the sky in the distance. Colorful lights illuminated the entire market. I stood at the stall door watching it all, feeling very peaceful. Next year, I'm going to go bigger and expand the business to surrounding cities. But right now, I just want to go home for New Year's Eve dinner. Mom, I'm coming home tomorrow. My phone buzzed right back. Okay. Mom's waiting for you. I put away my phone, locked up the stall, and drove out of the market. In the rearview mirror, I saw the wholesale seafood sign. It looked especially striking in the night.